All join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. It's funny when I was doing my offering just now and looking at the emaciated Buddha statue. For those who aren't familiar, it's the skinny-looking Buddha up here. Never seen the emaciated Buddha statue. That's it. But I was, as I was doing my offering, and it just kind of popped in my head, I still remember over 18 years ago, end of 2006, when we decided to open Dharma Bums, going to a little place called Buddha for You in the college area. Give me a second while I turn the volume down on this, otherwise I get to listen to myself talk on delay by about 5 seconds. That'll be really fun. Picking out this statue, I still remember walking into the store, and it was actually two pieces. It was that and the tapestry that's above the exit sign right there. That represents the first night that the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. But I remember picking out this statue, and there was something about it to me that was so special, other than just I thought it looked really cool, but just understanding the meaning behind it, which I may or may not get to tonight. I can if somebody wants me to get into it, but I'm not even bringing it up to talk about the meaning of it. But looking at the statue, and to me, it just felt so alive, and it looked so human to me. And that's, because the Buddha was a human, so it would make sense. But it's a statue. But to me, it just had this feeling of like being alive. And even now when I look at it, and for some reason, just this moment, it popped into my head that as he's sitting there, he's just not disturbed at all by anything. And for 18 years, this dude has watched the madness of the Dharma Bums evolve and grow and change. He hasn't moved. Not like one even like blink. I keep looking at him thinking that he's going to like blink or talk or move or get up. I don't know, maybe when the lights shut off and everyone leaves, he like walks around in here, who knows. But he just sits there not moving at all. And he just sits with all the chaos, all the madness, all the joy, all the sorrow, all the ups, all the downs, all the happiness, all the sadness. Did I say those two words already? I'm not sure, but he just sits. And the world keeps going. And it, in essence, reminds me of the story of the Buddha where he sat for 21 days under the Bodhi tree, and he's challenged by Mara. Mara is his mind, but in the story, if you ever heard it told, it's like a monster kind of coming at Siddhartha. And one of the things he does is he throws arrows at the Buddha, at Siddhartha at this time. And the word Buddha just means awakened one, so his name was Siddhartha. So Mara begins to throw his arrows at Siddhartha. And he sits in meditation, and he simply puts his hand up, the arrows turn to lotus petals and fall to the ground. Mara begins to rain hail, thunderstorm down on to the Buddha, thinking that he'll get him to move. And a king cobra comes up. They're called nagas, underwater shape-shifting serpents. I don't know if any of you have seen any of those or have any as pets, but they're pretty cool. They're like 7-headed cobras. And so this naga came up underneath him and gave him a seat and covered him to protect him. And again, he just sits. And Mara thought that he would tempt Siddhartha with desire, so he dances his beautiful daughters in front of Siddhartha, thinking that that would tempt him to move, and he just sits, and then they turn to stone. And ultimately, Mara, in frustration, says, "Nobody can defeat me. How dare you defeat me? Who bears witness to you defeating me?" And Siddhartha simply touches the earth, and it's called the earth-touching mudra. You'll see it in a lot of the statues. Simply touches the earth to show the earth is his witness. And the story is that the earth then trembled and shook, and Mara went away, meaning he overcame all the madness in his head, and he awakened. And but throughout that entire period, he just sat. And he began to watch the one thing that makes all the difference in the world, and that is the nature of your mind. Not anybody else's mind, not what anyone else is doing or throwing at you or pointing at you with, but your mind, watching how your mind reacts to the world around you. And again, to me, this statue just represents just sitting and being with life as it arises, and being mindful of what you think and what you say and what you do, because that's important. But to learn to sit. And someday I'm pretty sure he's going to start moving, but I don't know. Hopefully I'll be able to catch a glimpse of it. So with that, we're going to sit. For those who are joining for the first time, welcome. For those who are joining virtually, glad you're here. Feel free to say hello as you are. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. So we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Relaxing the shoulders, hands can be on the knees or lap, whatever is comfortable. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. With the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly, And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with life as it arises. And as we know, life is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. That's what we get. This practice is learning to sit with that. We spend so much time trying to fix, change, control, manipulate the things around us. This practice is learning to gain insight into the nature of your own mind. And as you do that, you can then begin to create change in this world that we're living in. But it starts with getting to know your mind. When I talk about Siddhartha sitting after roaming the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years, from 29 to 35, and then he said, I'm going to sit down and I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. And so he sat. 21 days, as they say. And again, that's to me what that statue represents, is he just sat. Disturbed by nothing. Disturbed by no one. And he began to see into the nature of his own mind. And as he settled and became no longer disturbed, he didn't spend the rest of his life sitting. In fact, I talked about this Saturday. I don't even know how we got here, but I in essence referenced if it was modern day, the Buddha would have been considered, he probably had a hashtag that said influencer. He was an influencer. It's what he was. It's what he did. He spent 45 years of his life roaming around trying to create change. He didn't just sit and do nothing. But the first thing he tackled was the cause and the only cause of his suffering, which was his mind. Not anyone else, not anything else. It was his mind. Once he overcame the suffering that was in his mind and was no longer disturbed, he spent 45 years trying to influence people to be kind and gentle to self and others. That's this practice. So use these teachings as a way to, in essence, just reflect back on the nature of your own mind. Not to use it to try to fix things outside of you or to change things or to even help other people initially. Use it to change the nature of your mind. That's where it begins. And you know how much fun that is? It's not. Hate to break it to you, but it's not fun. And it doesn't get fun. It gets more challenging and more difficult. But hopefully you learn to find humor in the craziness of your own head. Because that's what this is requiring you to do. Is to stop pointing fingers and blaming others and complaining. But to look at your thoughts, your words, your actions. And how potentially screwed up your thoughts, your words, and your actions are. Sounds like a lot of fun, huh? So, again, that's where this practice starts. And when you work on that for a number of years, then you see what's next. But that's the beginning. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I always prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And to those joining virtually, again, welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Feel free as you are to say hello in the chat box. If you have any questions, you can put them there. I'll do my best to respond, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. Yeah?
Two things. So, if you understand yourself, does that make it easier to understand other people? And then the second thing is just about the practice itself. Is it about quality or quantity?
Yeah. So the question, just to repeat it for those who didn't hear virtually or anyone else, the first question was, if you understand yourself, does that make it easier to understand others? And the second was the question about practice. Is it about quality or quantity? Yeah? That's your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the first thing is, you ever seen a lake? Yeah? If not, just imagine a lake, right? And imagine the water's pretty still, right? And now imagine just dropping a bunch of stones, rocks, pebbles, dirt. What happens to the lake? That was good. Can you do that? Yeah. So we got it. It goes like this. In case you didn't see that, right? It gets all like this. That's what happens, right? And so that's the reflection. This practice is about being, and you'll see so many Buddhist, metaphors about, calming the mind and using references to water and the oceans and lakes and streams and all that stuff. Another one I like to use is, imagine you have a vase and you have water in it, and you start out, water is still, it's clear, then you add rocks and sand and pebbles and you pick it up and you start shaking it, everything becomes a mess. You set the vase down, what happens? Everything settles. So this is our mind that is constantly disturbed by rocks and pebbles and sand. And with that disturbed mind, we roam around and interact with people. Aren't those people lucky? They get to deal with our disturbed mind. So, to your question specifically, I wouldn't necessarily say that getting to know the nature of your mind and understanding yourself means you're going to understand others better. But I would say that when we are less greedy, less angry, and less ignorant, we're more willing to actually listen and understand and just hear people for who and how they are. But this notion of, and it's very kind of this Western psychology, like let's understand ourselves and understand people. It's not even about understanding them, because we might just tell ourselves we understand them, but we don't know anything about them. All we're really responding to is how they project themselves to us. You ever met somebody for the first time? You ever been on like a first date? Right? On that first date, do you tell them all the terrible shit about you? No. Right? You're presenting a way that you want people to see you. So, I guess I would just caution that if we begin to, as you say, understand ourselves, that means we're going to understand others better. Not necessarily. But I think the less greedy, angry, and ignorant we are, the more compassion, wisdom, and generous we are with our heart and our mind and our time and everything about ourselves, I think the greater opportunity it is to see a truer reflection of others. If that makes any sense. And the second thing is around practice, as far as quality, quantity. I think it's a balance. I wouldn't necessarily say that one is more or less important than the other. And when you say practice, are you referring specifically just to meditation?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's your problem. Right? What I would suggest is meditation should be last of the practice. Look at the Buddhist teachings. The Fourth Noble Truth is the Eightfold Path. And this Eightfold Path is having correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Where's mindfulness and concentration on that list? At the end. What do most people show up to meditation in Buddhist places for? Meditation. Well, I guess if you show up to meditation places, makes sense, right? But you come to a Buddhist temple, and it says there's meditation. Everybody wants to jump into the meditation. One of my favorite expressions is an angry person who meditates is just an angry meditator. So you can lie and cheat and steal your whole life and then meditate, and that doesn't mean you're practicing anything. You're just sitting with all your crap. So moral, ethical conduct and behavior, the morality piece of practice, our livelihood of practice, our just conduct throughout our day, that's practice. Meditation is just sitting with all your shit and trying to not respond to it. That makes sense? So I would put a heavier emphasis, which is deeply missing in Western culture with Buddhist practice, because everyone's like, well, I'm just going to meditate. I mean, there's apps out there, and I'm not knocking them. If you use apps for meditation, phenomenal, keep using it. But, the apps out there are like, well, let's log how many hours we did today. I've done meditation for 132 days straight. Okay, but how many people did you swear at on the freeway? Are you tracking that? How many harmful thoughts did you have about someone today, including yourself? Are you tracking that? How often do you lie to yourself and to others? Are you tracking that? To me, that's quality of practice. And then all of those things, as far as kind of the quantity of it, do it all as much as you can. I've never been a big fan of, especially kind of along the theme that I'm speaking of, I've never been a big fan. I spent 20 years encouraging people to do meditation every day for 5 minutes. And that's it. Because even committing to 5 minutes every day is difficult. You know, if somebody says do this 20, 30, 40 minutes every day, twice a day, the odds of that happening is, for most people, is like 0. Right? If I suggest do this every single day for 5 minutes, it goes up to like 0.1%. You know? So it's really hard to commit to just sitting and breathing. So I'm not a big fan of encouraging people to try to do long meditation, especially if you're new to this. In that regard, just consistency is more important. Daily, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever you can do is great. But a heavier emphasis on kind of our actions throughout our day. To me, that's the practice. What else?
You said that the path of the Buddhist path is not fun. Can it be fun?
Can it be fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, life should be fun.
Should be.
And I think when I say the Buddhist practice and path in itself isn't fun, I think what I'm kind of getting at is that, especially early on, like getting to know the nature of your thoughts and your words and your actions isn't necessarily like, wow, this is great. Especially if you were an asshole most of your life. You know, it's like, wow, this sucks. So there wasn't fun to that. But I think ultimately, and I'm glad you point that out, ultimately, just forget even Buddhist practice, or path, just the path of life can be fun and exciting in everything. Like to me, everything is exciting and fun and enjoyable, even the misery. So I think when I say that the Buddhist path and practice isn't fun, I'm really more specifically talking about. I'm not referring to like living like what we would think is like a boring life necessarily has to be the way. More about truly getting to know the intention behind every thought, every word, and every action. I think that's really difficult and really challenging and doesn't ever get necessarily easier. And I personally don't think of that as like fun, you know? Like if I'm going to pick at, and not in a critiquing, judging way, not in like, oh, I'm so terrible or I'm so bad, but in a very honest, genuine way of like, can I really deeply connect and understand with why I think and say and do what I think, say, and do? And then kind of break it down and say, okay, how much of this is driven by pride and ego? How much is this driven by sense of self? And how much of this is driven by the opposite of all of that? You know, the non-self practice. So looking at all of that, I see it's a lot of work, you know, but I think the benefit and the kind of side effect and the result of that is that life itself becomes more enjoyable. Yeah.
You mentioned the emaciated Buddha.
Yeah.
And you were talking about it at some point. Could you briefly touch on that?
Yeah. So the statue of the emaciated Buddha is, you know, so he lived a life as a prince, all the wealth, all the riches, you know, had everything for 29 years. And then when he left home, they became wandering ascetics. And he was with 5 buddies, and they in essence thought at the time, you know, in India as Hindu, their belief at that time, it varied, of course, but one of their specific beliefs of Siddhartha and his little crew was that if they overcame attachment to physical form, that meant they could awaken. So it said that they ate 1 grain of rice a day to nearly starve themselves. They would like hang, you know, from a tree for like hours at a time, or stand on 1 leg for hours at a time, just trying to be with that physical pain and not attach to it. They thought that was the path. And so they ended up where you could take your fingers front to back and it would touch. He was so emaciated, so skinny. So they came to a riverbed and there was somebody, a woman was there offering them food. And they were like, no, we don't eat. This is our practice. And Buddha said something to the effect of, well, I'm hungry, right? Don't quote me on any of this, but especially not that. And he said, well, I'm hungry. And so the woman offered him the kanji, right? And it said that he put it in the river and said, if this bowl goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. So he put the bowl in the river, the bowl went against the stream. And so he decided to eat. And the 5 buddies he was with, they were like, no, you're a sellout, a traitor, you food eater, we're gone. And so they left him. But at that time, he began to eat and he regained his physical strength. And this is where really the middle path in Buddhism, the teachings come from. I'll come back to that in a minute, but recognizing the balance. So he continued his life, continued to roam around, and then eventually at 35 years old, sat for 21 days, as I mentioned, and began to watch the nature of his mind. And then those 5 guys, and that's to me why that tapestry is so special. That's what that tapestry represents, is there's Siddhartha sitting there under the Bodhi tree after 21 days, and the same 5 guys he was with who left him saw him. And they said, there's Siddhartha. He looks different. Let's go sit with him and see what's going on. So they sat down, and he said to them, I have understood the nature of all suffering. And he taught the 4 Noble Truths. First one being life is filled with suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. Doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means we have challenges in our lives. Some death, loss, extreme trauma, and little stuff like, you don't like the way your sandwich is made, or your lattes has too many pumps of caramel, or whatever it is, right? All the important things that we get pissed off at throughout the day. And so that was the first noble truth. Life is filled with discomfort. The second one is the cause. They're called the 3 poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. And we overcome greed, anger, ignorance with the practice of generosity, compassion, and wisdom. The third is the ending of suffering, the third noble truth. And that's nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering. And the fourth is the path, as I mentioned, the Eightfold Path. So he taught that, and those guys said to him, you've awakened. We will call you the Buddha. So they gave him that name, which, like I said, just means the awakened one. Then he taught for 45 years and he died. But that statue at that moment representing the middle path, to me, is an incredibly important lesson for all of us to ask ourselves, not that we need to starve ourselves, not that we need to go sit under a tree for 21 days, not that we are trying to awaken, but look at your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, and ask yourself, where is your balance? Do you live with so much excess of stuff, of food, of clothes? Who here has 50 shirts? Do you need 50 shirts? No. The answer to that is usually no. Well, If you got rid of 30 shirts, forget that. Get rid of 20 shirts, right? You keep 30. You're still going to be okay.
Is that like the abundance Buddha where you see the Buddha belly?
No. Oh, I hate to shatter you. So this is like, I know, you're good. No, you're good. She said, is that like the abundance Buddha where you see the belly? No. It's just kind of like finding out that Santa Claus isn't real. Or the Easter Bunny. So if you don't know this by now, those are not real, and I hate to shatter your view. But a lot of people, especially in Western culture, they think that big belly Buddha, abundance Buddha, happy Buddha, good luck Buddha, they think that was the Buddha. It was not the Buddha at all. His name was Hotai, means bag carrier. He was a monk in China about 1,000 years ago, who was very lucky, very prosperous, roamed around with a big bag of gifts to give out to people. Sound familiar, right? And we think we invented everything, So he was a monk. Now, when the images of Buddha and Buddhism started coming west, that was the image that most people saw, was this happy Buddha, laughing Buddha. And so he became known as the Buddha for good luck. You go to casino. You ever been to a casino recently? There they are, right? Because for many Asian cultures, they believe that if you throw money at the happy Buddha, that you're going to get stuff back. Casinos are winning there for sure. And then we're like, oh, let's throw our quarters at the happy Buddha, because then we'll go win. right? So culturally, he became known as let's rub the belly for good luck. And, I'm a baseball dude. I'm a superstitious guy. So, hey, I'm going to rub the belly for good luck. Don't rub the head. It's bad luck. And apparently I learned about 12 years ago, don't tell a customer who comes into Buddha for you to tell it that rubbing the head is bad luck, because she'll get really pissed off at you and give you a 1-star review on Yelp. Apparently I killed her vibe because she walked in and started rubbing the Buddha head, the happy Buddha head, and I said, you're supposed to rub the belly for good luck. It's bad luck to rub the head. She got so pissed. Wrote like the nastiest review. It was it was fun. It was the funniest thing. But anyway, so back to the emaciated Buddha. The balance is finding balance and seeing where you're out of balance, right? You get rid of 30 shirts, 20 shirts, you still got 20 or 30, you're okay. You got 20 pairs of shoes, you don't need 20 pairs of shoes. And I put a low number for many of you in this room, right? 20, you're fine. There's only 7 days a week. How many pairs of shoes do you wear a day? And again, this is coming from somebody who used to spend thousands of dollars on clothes. I was going out on a Saturday, I'd go shopping for 3 hours just to find the perfect thing to wear. I had the shirt that matched the pants, that matched the belt, that matched the shoes, that matched the watch. I lived that life. I'm not coming from a place of judgment or anything like that. That life drove me insane. It really did. Hours spent figuring out what to wear. So you look at kind of symbolically the life of the Buddha. He was a prince who had long, beautiful hair. So he cut it as a sign of showing non-attachment to the physical presence. That's where the culture and the tradition of shaving the heads for monks and nuns came in. We renounce this kind of attachment to our physical beauty. So they shaved their heads. They put on robes, meaning they've renounced this attachment to the princely robe. A prince had a lot of clothes. Probably pretty nice, even 2,500 years ago. And so he got rid of all that and found a bunch of cloth and sewed it together to make a robe. And he had 2 robes. So he went from life of a prince to living with 2 robes for 45 years. And he lived just fine, So again, the teaching is not that you need to shave your head. Some of us don't have to worry about that too much anymore, right? Not that you have to get rid of all your clothes, not that you have to stop eating, but just think about where you're out of balance and how much we spend on so much stuff. And if we didn't spend so much on so much stuff, then we'd have more, you spend $20 on a lunch. You could spend $10 and then take $10 and go feed somebody sleeping on the streets. So just find your balance. Yeah. And so when we opened this temple, when we picked that statue, it was because we didn't want to sit with this already enlightened Buddha. We wanted, that was us. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, near death. So we sat with him as a reminder that if this dude who was near death could figure out how to end suffering, then there's hope for us. Yeah. So, what else? Do one more question before we close.
I'm not sure if this is a question or not, but I would love to hear you talk about standing up for yourself.
Standing up for yourself.
Where
does
it come in?
Yeah, again, and that's kind of why I followed up my kind of opening comments when I was looking at the Buddha, and I was like, he just sits. And so I always like to add to that for those who might be brand new to Buddhism, that Buddhism doesn't mean that you ignore so much of the injustice in the world. You shouldn't ignore any of it. You should be awake and aware of all of it and work your ass off to create change. And that means standing up for yourself and for others. As a person of tremendous privilege, as a white, heterosexual, male, able-bodied, I've got all the privilege in the book, right? Nothing about me has ever been oppressed. And never will be oppressed, sadly. Not sadly, but you know what I mean? Never will be. So, you must stand up for yourself and for others to create change. And that's why Saturday I was talking about that, is kind of the joke about the Buddha being an influencer. He didn't just awaken and then poof and vanish and like float away and be like, yo, peace out, see y'all, good luck. No, he spent 45 years trying to stand up for people, trying to fight for people. But, and this is where Thich Nhat Hanh is a perfect example of, the kind of phrasing engaged Buddhism. Thich Nhat Hanh is the late Vietnamese peace activist, Buddhist monk, poet, just an incredible human, and walked alongside Martin Luther King, fighting for racial justice. And this idea that we should continue to fight, but with love and compassion in our hearts, not hatred and anger. And I think that ties into the earlier question about the more we get to understand ourselves, and your question about does that mean we'll understand others? If we see and experience and have less anger, hatred, and ignorance in our hearts and our minds, then I find it a lot easier to see less anger, hatred, and ignorance in other people's minds. And you begin to understand, maybe not them, but you understand the nature of why people do what they do. Right? I mean, if I've been beaten and abused my whole life, then there's a pretty good chance I'm going to continue that vicious cycle of beating and abusing others. So that cycle can and should break. And it doesn't break from silence. So we sit to get quiet and still and not be disturbed. So then when we go to work with people who are disturbed and disturbing, inside our hearts and minds, that's us. Nothing can disturb you. Nothing can trigger you. Nothing can make you angry. And it doesn't mean that what's going on is good or you like it. It means you yourself are not disturbed by what you perceive to be the ignorance of others. Then you can create tremendous change. But you have to be fearless and definitely stand up for people. Definitely be a voice. This practice that, a lot about, obviously, the meditation, and so people might think, especially if you're new, that, well, it's silence. I don't see, I'm coming back to how do I see this practice, I don't see Buddhist practice as silent at all. I see it as very loud, quietly. It's quietly loud. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else before we close? All right, so we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Shirley Tam during her time of rebirth, and to Danny and the family and friends who suffer at this time. Before you all head out, our Dharma Bum host Molly has a few announcements. Oh, and while Molly's coming up, if any of you are available noon between 12 and 1 and know how to do this, we're looking for a new Tuesday person to lead silent meditation from 12 to 1. It's 2 25-minute meditations, and you just get to do this 4 times. So if you're interested, let me know.
Hi, everyone. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library, and if you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.